Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's gang. Let's meet the panel.
I'm Ari.
I'm Amber from Amber Unabridged.
I'm Sara.
And I'm Josh. And we are honored and privileged to welcome our very special guest, Amber from Amber Unabridged.
Thank you.
I was going through my Goodreads to prepare for this discussion about Doctor Who Borrowed Time, which Ari selected to put on the agenda. And I saw that Amber had it on her TBR and thought that this would be a great opportunity to have her on as a special guest.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and participate with you guys.
It's our pleasure and it's our privilege too. During these times, it's best to make the best out of this thing that they call Zoom. Today, we're going to be going over Doctor Who Borrowed Time by Naomi Alderman. This features the 11th Doctor, played by Matt Smith, and features a supporting cast of Amy Pond and Rory Williams. And Ari, you have a discussion starter?
Right, so, I've read this book a couple times, and out of all the Doctor Who novels I have, this one's probably my favorite. My discussion starter is actually going to go in an interesting direction. The two main protagonists, the shark-like, they're called, I guess you could be making fun of the word loan shark here, so to speak, because that's essentially what they are, but the shark antagonists here, Mr. Symington and Mr. Bleckensaw, they're basically stealing time from people by, putting these devices on their wrists, putting these hidden concepts, like about, interest upon interest upon interest. I'm curious if you guys, since you all read the book, I'm assuming if you guys feel that you learned a lot about, economics and, how compound interest works and just in general about how, it was a lot more, the book was more educational than you initially thought it was going to be, especially in that department, because I can tell you it certainly felt, I learned quite a lot about, different types of economics and stuff from this book than I probably have from the stock market. I'm just curious if you guys felt
the most educational part had to do with the chocolate cake.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
That was a very helpful example of how compound interest works.
It was the best part of the whole thing because it was a very interesting and a very relatable analogy. The fact that I could actually picture the solid chocolate icing as being as hearty as the cake itself, and also as detrimental as far as time used versus time owed.
When he was piling up all the frosting
Yes.
to represent the interest, I was like, eventually he's gonna run out of frosting from the main cake. And also that just seems like a lot of frosting. I mean, who doesn't love chocolate cake? I'm sure a lot of people don't love chocolate cake. I was like, either way, that's way too much frosting.
You gotta stop it at some point. Too much of a good thing. The cake scene, it definitely stood out the most from what I remember the most from the book, just from how not only did it explain the concept of compound interest, but also the character's realization of, oh no, this is
What have I done?
Yeah.
What I also found interesting as well, reading it, when they first kind of present the idea of, oh, you only pay 5% interest. And I was like, okay, but that's 5% on top of what you borrow. And then I don't think that or I missed it, or I got confused. I was like, I don't think they're charging back what they actually lend out. It sounded like they were only charging the interest, which I found interesting because I don't think most loan sharks work that way. It's like you have to pay back what you borrow plus interest.
The issue is that they weren't looking well enough into the terms and conditions. After watching the Human Centipede episode of South Park, the moral to the story is always read the terms and conditions.
Read the fine print.
I always happen to do that whenever I have to sign something, even if it's something like, really simple. I always read between the lines, so to speak. I always read the fine print, as Sara just said. Yeah. But like I'm so used to saying episode. This book just has. I felt this book was great because it had characters, supporting characters, not like the three, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory. It had like other supporting characters that you could really relate to, like Andrew Brown, for instance. A very relatable character where he's one of the first people I've ever seen in a Doctor Who book where it's like, oh, I don't believe you. He's like, well, why don't you turn the dial and find out what happens? And he actually does. Instead of being afraid and like, okay, I believe you. He actually turns the dial and he ages what, 10 years, 15 years? I forget exactly what the number was. Paid back 1% of his interest and he gained years in age. And that was a powerful scene for me too, because it really shows that stuff doesn't come without consequence.
You mean when his hair started to grow gray, and he started developing wrinkles in his forehead. Yeah, that was pretty
and
powerful.
then with the other character who, Samika, was that her name? I forget her name.
Samira.
Samira, the one where her watch developed a fault and it literally reverted her from being a kid to an old woman back to a kid again until it was finally stabilized, although at the wrong age later in the book.
That was Nadia. That was a different.
Oh, that was Nadia. Sorry.
Yeah.
Nadia's the one that got younger and then got older again.
Yeah, Samira was.
Yeah, Samira was one of the. She was. I think she was eventually the one that was like the head of the whole entire operation. Yeah, Nadia's the one I'm thinking of.
Nadia's the one that became 10 and then they were able to adjust her to 20. Yeah, Samira, when she came back in one of the last chapters, she was 65, and then they were able to readjust her back immediately.
Yeah, I couldn't remember which characters were which with those two. I always get the two mixed up.
Yeah, I mix them up too.
The point I'm trying to make is that particular scene with Andrew was very powerful too. I felt that even in the TV show, it's like one of the first times where the supporting cast would say, "I don't believe you. You're just another person, Doctor. I need you to prove it to me." He's like, "Okay, pay back 1% of your interest." He's like, "Okay, what's going to happen?" And then he gets older by like 20 years. I'm like, "Oh crap!" So that's not that right there is not something you'd actually really see in the TV show either. I don't know, how many of you watch the TV show, but you don't normally see that. You normally see, maybe it's because when you write for TV, you have to cut down on the amount of time, because there's time constraints in all the episodes. But with this, when you get a page number, you get a page limit, and you can pretty much do whatever you want with it.
I'm actually coming from the perspective of somebody that is not well versed in the series. I don't watch it. I'm not very interested in it. I did watch a little bit of the 11th Doctor in order to prepare and get a sense of what he's like and what Amy and Rory are like, because they are featured in the series. The other characters are creations of Alderman's imagination.
Right, and the monsters aren't from the Symington and Bleckensop and all the sharks. This is their first appearance in the Hooniverse as well, so it's not like you're going to see them anywhere else.
I'll be honest, I think that I don't think that they're very well constructed antagonists. I think that they were very cheaply put together, and they were also it's always Symington says one thing and then Bleckensop right after says something. It's like they speak in unison. I just don't think that they're
I think that was done deliberately. That was done deliberately to give the audience like a hint that something was sinister about them, that it wasn't quite right at the beginning of the book.
Definitely creepy.
And you'll notice, like, it's not even just that. I mean, if you look at the very, very, very end of the book, you'll notice that, there were two other sharks that had come out of nowhere. We don't even know where they are, but they're in Germany or something. Or something like that.
From the 1600s.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like different species, like it's just the way the species is. It's not necessarily the character that's like. And then of course,
it's creepy better.
If you haven't watched the TV show, there are some parts near the end of the book. Even if you watched one episode of Doctor Who, it wouldn't have made sense because with the Doctor being a Time Lord, being from Gallifrey, that kinds of stuff, you have to watch the series.
Yeah.
I think overall, for the majority of the book, this is something that it was easy to understand, and that's why I recommended it on the draft.
I really enjoyed reading it. I've been kind of collecting Doctor Who novelizations because I'm moderately obsessed with Doctor Who. I have a number that I've been meaning to get to. So when Josh reached out, I was like, heck yeah, I'm down to join you guys because I have to read it. And I can, knock another book off my list. But no, I was gonna say in response to what you're talking about, like with the loan sharks at the end, I feel like they were the same sharks. They weren't just like they weren't like new ones. I feel like they were the same ones. The whole thing was that both of the sharks were actually the same person, and that they were later incarnations of that like evil like head of bank lady. I don't remember her name.
There's Jane and there's Vanessa.
Jane, yeah, the secretary.
Jane is the one that was the eventually the head of all
and
the
so
sharks.
Like after the Doctor pulls his Doctor stuff at the end and kind of strips her of all of her power and abilities, they're talking him and the time market people.
The time market. That was amazing.
That was
I loved
so
that
cool.
scene. That was cool. Like imagine that being on TV.
Yeah,
it would have been
nuts.
like
He was talking about how, she's not gone. She's somewhere in the universe, and I'm tasking you guys with finding her. And then after that, it's like 1600s Netherlands, and here's these two like dudes showing up with the same spiel as the beginning of the book, and it's like it's starting all over again. So
They are
that's-
aliens,
Yeah.
so they are probably taking on a different name. They're the same flesh,
Yeah.
per se.
Yeah, I
that's
think
what
it
I
was
thought.
the same woman giving herself new incarnations, and like they just had different names to fit the setting that they were in.
That's the feeling I was getting too. It just felt like, and that kind of also what made them kind of cartoony and villainous like that. Like it was all just this same entity, character, whatever it was. It was this loan shark. No matter what setting or time period, a loan shark will have the same moral compass and qualities in any setting or time.
Which,
Yeah, and-
which on one point could look very cartoony if you're reading it from like a fresh new perspective. But like if you're looking at it from a moral perspective, like like Sarah just said, all loan sharks, they tend to have the same behaviors. They're not, they're just going to try and get money from you no matter whatever they can do to do it. And if that's what's basically in common. Like you're just taking the word shark and you're making it a literal term rather than a figurative term, and boom, you have this book. Which is why I think this is, it's so amazing that a simple switch of figurative and literal speech really made this book what it was. And I think I think, if I'm also correct, Naomi Alderman might have been one of the first female authors of Doctor Who novels, at least with the Matt Smith ones, I'm sure. I think Una McCormick also did a couple,
I'll
but
have to check it out.
it's Alderman also did she's very fixed on like, what if something happened in a different way? Like what if there was a path that was changed and that new path is what's happening? She actually wrote a book about how females are the hierarchy in society, and there's like these blood games and stuff. Like she's very, that is her forte, is kind of making up parallel dimensions based off of choices that were made. So here you have the sharks who, in the past they made all these choices, and then suddenly, there's all this explosion of time going on and a million sharks that are the same two sharks popping up in different spots. Like that is definitely something Naomi Alderman is good with. That's her forte with her novels, whether they're Doctor Who or otherwise. So that's what I really appreciate about
I
her.
feel really silly because the whole time I'm like, man, her name looks familiar. I didn't realize that she was the one who wrote, what was it, The Power or something like that? The one that you're talking about where the females have like power in their hands or something.
I'm not sure if that's what it's called, but I do remember she wrote a book with that.
Yeah, as soon
general
as you
idea.
started talking about it, I was like, what? No way. I didn't realize it was the same author. But also, fun fact, that's the second thing about this book that has schooled me and made me feel real silly, because full disclosure, I did not realize when the dudes started changing into sharks that it was a literal metaphor for them being loan sharks until I read the words loan shark. And I was like, oh, I see what you did there. It took me way too long to figure that part out.
So, like, I will agree that when she was describing the sharks, like, oh, the teeth pulled back all the way and the lump on the back came out, I agree that's a little corny, but you want to know something? There have been some Doctor Who monsters, especially in the classic series, that have looked and sounded and had a concept that was extremely corny, but the episodes still work.
Of course.
So I stand by that.
Graphics and images back then, too. Doctor Who's been going on since the 60s.
Mostly.
Yeah, on and off.
But like, if I was going to recommend one Doctor Who book to you guys for Literary Gladiators, this is the one, because the other ones are good, but I felt this one was great. So that's why I was like, okay, what do you guys think?
That's an
Great.
interesting thing that I wanted to bring up. Do you think that this book stands well on its own, or is it simply for the Doctor Who market?
I've never watched a single episode of Doctor Who. I know what the general concept is about, but I really never watched it. I can't put names to the faces of which Doctor is which. So I basically jumped into the book blind. I actually did an audiobook version of it, but that's another story. And I was still able to enjoy it and understand what was going on. And maybe it was almost like a little bit of a plus for me because I can like use my own imagination to picture what the characters looked like and what the monsters looked like instead of having some preconceived ideas.
Oh, and you said you had the audiobook, right, Sarah? So you didn't actually see what the characters looked like.
That is true too. Yeah, I also didn't have that cover on or see the people at all. It was just a silhouette. It looks like a graphic design cover. Even with that, I was able to follow the story. You didn't have to know background information about the characters. Maybe I was a little less invested in them because I didn't care about them as much because I didn't know more about them besides what was in the book. But there was still enough for me to relate to them, like working, well, even though it wasn't the main idea or theme of the book, relating to someone who is like working a stable job, and almost everyone will do this at some point in their lives or for a large portion of their lives. They're going to work a job where they're financially stable, working in this financial system that reaps off of them, and you want time to do things that you can't do. So, you work 9 to 5, go home, you wish you could do more things. And so, oh wait, these loan sharks come and now I can have more time. Then it also goes into like the fear of aging, and it goes into a lot of little like branches off into little themes like that aren't really the main purpose of the book, but it's lots of things that people can relate to. I was able to relate to, and it made me think. So I enjoyed the book, even though I did not watch Doctor Who.
I think that if you were to take the Doctor, Amy, and Rory out of this book, have Andrew Brown be the main character, I mean like the main character, where, these guys come down and give him more time, and then you have like a random character like die because he used the watch, and he like is able to figure out without the doctor's help, he just figures out in his own brain, oh wow, these things are dangerous. Me and maybe Samira and Nadia and all of us, we can get together and stop this and find out it's an alien incursion. That still works. I think you might need more characters if that was the case, because you'd be missing these three. You probably need more supporting characters. But to answer your question, Josh, do I think this could be a concept used in a non-Doctor Who book? Absolutely. Get rid of the 3 regular characters, put Andrew, Samira, and Nadia in their place. Have some of the things that happen to them happen to some other supporting characters. Keep Symington and Black and Sop in there as aliens, and maybe it wouldn't be as much science fiction. It would be more fantasy or maybe even horror, but like it would work. That's my opinion on the matter.
It could have been fleshed out a little bit more. The Doctor Who part of it seemed to restrict it a little bit more because
the ending would have to be changed slightly, obviously.
Alderman had to follow a bit of a baseline because of that.
And I think also it's possible that some of the Doctor Who stuff is kind of like they're assuming that people who are familiar with the show and familiar with the 11th Doctor and Amy and Rory are going to be the ones reading the book. So there might not be as much time spent describing, what a Time Lord is or what a TARDIS is, all kind of built into the universe already.
Yeah, the ending is the one thing that would have to change if we were going to make this a non-Doctor Who book.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Personally, I feel that the ending, there's one thing against this book that I have. I feel the ending is strong, but it's not accessible. A lot of the books, like the King's Demon, Una McCormack had a book with Amy and Rory. There's another book called Apollo 23 that was, I think that was Justin Richards. Those books had proper conclusions that had nothing to do with in TV show stuff. It would be like, oh, look, these monsters are made of like this liquid and they're getting into astronaut suits and stuff, like what do? We stop the liquid, we heat it, and boom, it's over. Or we freeze it. I forget which one it was. But that's something that anyone can do, not just the Doctor, if you put in a story. But this one, the absolute solution had everything to do with the TV show. And that's the only fault. It's not even a fault. It's just it makes it less accessible, I think. If you could take that out and replace it with a different solution, I think this book is it's amazing. I already think it's pretty good as in and of itself.
I do think it played a lot like the TV show, though. I think that it very much reflected a television episode, and I think that being able to know details about Doctor Who would benefit you when it came to approaching this book.
Also, I have a small question for all of you. It kind of brought up what I had said about the Doctor, Amy, and Rory actually being in it. To give you an example, there was an episode of Doctor Who, which it's a Dalek episode. You guys know what the Daleks are, even if you're not a Doctor Who fan. It was an episode in 1971 called Day of the Daleks, and it was originally supposed to just be there is a guerrilla gang from the 22nd attacking people from the 20th, but when they go back to the 20th century, they cause all these wars that cause them to become who they were in the 22nd century. So essentially, it's a paradox. But then the producers are like, you know what, let's just add in the Daleks, because we haven't had the Daleks for 7 years. And they did. The episode was still good. My question is, do you think that this story could have been successful as it is here, if we get rid of the Doctor, Amy, and Rory, we change the ending a little bit so it's a little more of a literal ending rather than a non-accessible ending based on the TV show? You think this could be still a good story if you get rid of those two elements?
With the proper polishing, yes. But you have to tweak a lot. And I think that, I know with Andrew and Samira, the way that their story ended, it was just very rapid, where Samira's, I want to run a deli, and Andrew is, well, I want to be a teacher. And then they kiss and they walk out of the bank, never to come back.
It's a little bit cliche.
That is a very cliche ending.
Well, and also what I like about Doctor Who is that, it's a show about an alien, or show or books, the canon, the show. It's about an alien who travels through time and space. What I tell people who don't watch Doctor Who much is that even though it's about an alien, we're really learning a lot about humanity. So the Doctor drops in and he's looking at humanity as an outsider. He's like, oh, look at the humans. They're, living their life and they're doing things. And this moment is so important. There's stuff like that in the show, like with the Ninth Doctor. I'm thinking about when they're stuck in the church, this is, you guys met in catching the same taxi. It's the most human thing. I felt like when I read that part of this book, it really kind of just was like, people, and as I was reading it, I was like, wow, yeah, we spend so much time. It's like, where did the day go? It's kind of, I like how it makes you think about your own life again through this lens of an alien. And then at the end, it's like, here's some people who are just like, working the daily grind. And they're like, we don't want to do this anymore. Let's go live our dream lives. Let's go pursue it. And it's just, they decide to live their fullest life then. I don't know. It's Doctor Who is so cheesy, but I love the cheesiness.
This book, if you're a Doctor Who fan, I think this is going to be an excellent book. If you're like an open-minded fan, if you want to learn more about the series, this might be a little bit complicated, but it would be a good read. Not great, but good. No reference to the website, Josh. I'm just saying good read. But
Okay.
but I think if if this is a book, if you are looking for a book to read, like a book, not like one of a specific genre or one of a specific TV show, this might not be the book for you. Just because of how complicated it can be in some spots and how convoluted it can be in some spots, and how the ending is more for people who are fans of the TV show. I would say this book is, if you're more of a fan of the show, or you want to become a fan of the show and you're looking for an outlet, this is a good place to head to. But if you're just, more just into reading books that are just books and not into a particular genre, I'm not sure.
Do we have any final thoughts?
I loved it. It was Doctor Who zany fun times. So I was a fan. I was happy to read it.
And Sarah?
As a person mostly picking up this book at random, I have to say it had interesting ideas and themes that made me think, while also having it was a fun story. I felt like I more gravitated towards it because it wasn't complicated. I didn't feel like it was complicated. It was something I can just, all right, I'm going to read this kind of like fantasy, sci-fi kind of action kind of story. And like the like, it was tense at certain parts and it pulled back and made you contemplate on certain things in your life. Then there was another actiony part, so it had good pacing, and I wasn't too emotionally attached to anyone in it, but I was able to understand it and get enjoyment out of it for not knowing or watching Doctor Who.
I have a quick question for Sarah, if that's okay, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, you said you had listened to the audio book version. Can you let the viewers know where you got that, and also if you felt like it was different than reading the actual book? Like, I'm curious where you got it as well.
Absolutely.
Actually.
So I got a free trial off of Amazon on this app called Audible. You basically got a free.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
I have to say, listening to an audiobook, I made sure to just find a quiet place and just sit with my eyes closed. And listening to an audiobook, I wouldn't do it again. It's a much more passive activity than reading. With reading, if like you lose focus you go back and go to the part that you just read with an audiobook, it keeps playing, and my thoughts kept like trailing and thinking of different things, even though I was really trying to focus on it and not do anything else or multitask. And I know a lot of people who like to listen to like podcasts or just like to listen and do things at the same time. I feel like they can't get as much out of it as if they were to just sit with a book and just read a book. It feels like a very different experience. I wouldn't listen to an audiobook again, but for some people, audio is better for them.
I'm old school. If I'm looking to read a book, I'm looking
Me
to
too.
read a book. Doesn't
I
shock me.
prefer having the actual, binding proper pages. It's the smell, it's the smell of books.
Sarah, for your
Uh,
audiobook, they have a full cast? Was it different people narrating the different characters?
It was the same voice the whole time, so
Okay.
that also gets a little tiring.
Hey, as long as it wasn't Ben Stein. I mean, if it was Ben Stein, that might be an issue. I would never listen to Ben Stein.
It was
do an
not Ben
audiobook.
Stein. I can't remember her name. I'll have to look it up. And she did a good job.
Could it have been the
I think
author,
it
or
was
was it
someone
someone
else.
else?
And she did a good job. It's
Okay.
just I think I cater more towards reading a book than listening to it. But others, yeah, she did a good job, but it just wasn't my thing.
Okay, we're going to go to ratings, but I wanted to
Let's
show
just-
Ari how to properly smell a book. Already. How would we rate
Okay,
it?
but my book is older.
Okay.
That's
0
the
to
same one
5
as
stars,
mine.
half stars permitted. Ari?
It's a bit of a bias on my end because I've watched the show. I know everything about what happened in this book, so that's the direction I'm going to be coming from when I rate this. I think that along with another story, which you guys should check out if you like Doctor Who, it's called Touched by an Angel by Jonathan Morris. Both of those books, this one and that one, are my favorite in the Matt Smith Doctor Who collection. I would give this one, and I'd actually give the other one, a 4-star rating. I think they're really good. Naomi Alderman does a great job with this book. I feel like everything is just explained clearly. But I would not be surprised if some of our other non-Doctor Who enthused people would give it a lower rating.
I actually didn't remember what I rated it, so I just checked on Goodreads. I gave it 5 stars. It's probably like 4.5, honestly. I am generally very enthusiastic, so I'm just like, woo, Doctor Who, I loved it. So, and it was just fun.
Amber, definitely check out Touched by an Angel by Jonathan Morris. It's another 11th Doctor story featuring the Weeping Angel. So it's really... You read
I haven't
it?
read
Okay.
it, but I own it. So I'll check that one next.
Go. Yeah, it's a recommendation.
Excellent. I will listen.
sure.
Thank you.
I think I'll give it 3.5 because I was surprised that I did enjoy it to the extent I did. I didn't think it was amazing. I don't think it's this book that I'll keep thinking back to through the rest of my life on how amazing it was. And this ending was just too cheesy. I'm very lactose intolerant to this cheesy ending. So I think 3.5 stars is fair for me.
When did you
You're
become
a vegan,
clever,
you
Sarah?
disdain cheese.
That is true. That as well. So maybe it deserves lower because of that. But I'll stick to my 3.5 stars.
In order to give a properly executed rating, I'd probably have to either read more Doctor Who or watch more Doctor Who. But from how I approached it, I'm giving it 2.5 because I felt that I think that it would have, as a standalone, it could have worked. I don't know as much about Doctor Who, but I do think that it created a bit of a lag on the characters where the antagonists were a little bit thin. I think Andrew could have potentially have been a strong character, but the way that him and Samira fizzled out was a little bit thin. I think that Nadia would have been a fascinating character. Vanessa and Jane could have been more enigmatic.
I think if you make this like into an adult book, I think you would get those wishes. This is a young adult book, not a it's not like a full-fledged Stephen King.
And
they may have been a little more fleshed out if she had more.
And it played like a TV show. So if you're marketing this for a general audience, then it doesn't work. If you're marketing it as kind of like the Star Trek books and the Star Wars books, the Doctor Who books, then it may work better and people may get more out of it, but it fulfills the TV episode.
I also would say, if you're willing to kind of open yourselves up to Doctor Who, if you're like, want to read a couple books like in like an order rather than just the one book, like this actually is a good book to start with the exception of the ending. But you know what? I'm sure a friend could explain that to you, or it could be explained if you look in like different places online and stuff. But I think like Josh is right. For general readers, like people who are not fans of fantasy, science fiction, or Doctor Who, might really it might not be the best thing to read. But if you're interested in that stuff, give this a shot, because there's even newer ones out now, and there's also like encyclopedias and stuff that you can read on the show too. So I would agree with Josh on that 100%.
It's for sure catered to Doctor Who fans. So one fun fact, one thing my brother always says about Doctor Who is you never want to apply too much logic to Doctor Who, because whenever the writers get themselves into sticky situation, they're just like, whatever, we'll just throw in a Dalek, or whatever, space-time continuum, and they just make it work somehow. So I think it's more about the experience than about the logic and the full fleshed out.
I mean, it's time travel.
It's timey-wimey.
Yes. If you're interested in checking out this book, here is my copy of Doctor Who, Borrowed Time.
Mine's backwards. Sorry about that, but it's there. It's just backwards.
It comes off backwards on your own camera, but when this saves, they're all going to look. They're all going to look forward. So before we go, Amber, is there anything you would like for people to know about your channel, Amber Unabridged?
I haven't posted in a while. I've been in sort of a posting slump. I like to do videos for short stories. So if people are looking to get into short stories, I have a thing I call Short Story Sundays. And in general, I just like to read things that I enjoy and talk about books in any capacity, really. It's kind of
I agree completely. We need to incorporate as much of the art of the written work as possible. We go over books and novels, we go over short stories, poems, plays, graphic texts, so much more. So I'm glad that you also incorporate that into your channel.
One thing I love about Literary Gladiators is like how diverse the content is that you guys read. So I feel very honored to participate, be kind of an honorary gladiator now.
Yay.
We're so happy to have you on board as a guest.
But the message we bring across is always clear, right, Josh? It's keep reading.
That is correct. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into this discussion. And be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators as our 13th season continues. For now, keep reading. Reading.